So hi everyone, both online and in person. I'm Aliyah. I'm going to be your MC for this event today. And I'm a Trinity Inclusive Curriculum student partner. And I would like to welcome you all to this Trinity-INC organized and sponsored event. Let's talk about race and ethnicity in Trinity. So first, I would like to put an emphasis on the importance of having this conversation in the higher educational system and how we can and should talk about race and ethnicity, addressing them around different angles and being aware that these issues of racism exist even within university. And the fact that also we should not be reluctant in addressing them and facing racism directly, rather than avoiding opening discussions about it. And all of this is fundamental to create a more inclusive space. Obviously, university is a place of learning where we are allowed to make mistakes, of course, to feel uncomfortable around difficult topics and move forward from there. So this is what we're trying to do here at the Trinity-INC project and with this event as well. So just a brief introduction about myself and my research. What personally motivated me to come study at Trinity in my master's in Identities and Cultures of Europe was actually to reflect upon my own identity, which I regard as complex and dynamic, because it's also something that's often questioned. So this includes, of course, the most visible part of my identity that you can all see here. And so talking about race and ethnicity and learning how to do it accurately and how to articulate this lived experience that I have is a very personal journey as well. So this I wanted to achieve in my master's dissertation, exploring mixed heritage women's complex identities and ambiguous representations in French African context, because I'm French and that's the area I know best, Franco-Senegalese woman as a Franco-Senegalese woman. So it is my pleasure and very honored to take part in this event on a topic that affects me and many other students very directly. So just a quick overview of our schedule today. We first have the launch of a video on making the curriculum in Trinity more inclusive for Black students. Then we have another short video featuring the experiences of student members of the traveler community in higher education. And then Sean Hatherley, who leads the Trinity-INC Student Partner Program, and I will then promote the Let's Talk About Race training, which is an online module now available for all TCD staff and students. And finally, I will be delighted to welcome the wonderful speakers that we have today for a panel discussion and a Q&A on how we should talk about race and ethnicity in Trinity. We have very great speakers today, so I'm very much looking forward to that conversation, which sounds very promising. So I suggest we get started with the first video, which is going to be an extract from the initial one. So this video is created for the Trinity-INC project by Tosin Adebayo, who graduated from the School of Nursing and Midwifery. This video poses the questions directly to Trinity students of Black African ethnicity. How inclusive is your experience within Trinity, and how do we make the curriculum more inclusive for Black students? So unfortunately, Tosin, who is on night as a nurse this week, wasn't able to join us today, but we really appreciate her contribution. I appreciate the fact that she did this for us and wish her the very best. So now over to the video.
With patients and people and staff out on placements or when you're working, and I feel like that's when you really gain the experience that the Irish population is more diverse than the course content is delivered. When you're out on placements, you really get to see the different kinds of illnesses that different populations and ethnicities go through, such as Black people, for example, might go through a certain type of hereditary disease that's not really found in the Irish population, but our course content isn't delivered with that in mind. So that's when I really realized that the course isn't too inclusive.
For the most part, I do find it quite inclusive. I am in a health science course, so a lot of the stuff that we learn is applicable to like every kind of race. Maybe learning about these basic principles, it'd be nice to kind of see some diversity in the diagrams in the use and the examples we give. A lot of the time we're learning about problems that happen in Ireland, Europe, or America, it'd be nice to kind of hear some stats about, maybe the stroke rates in Iran or Nigeria. And again, with the diagrams, just having more just other kind of bodies when it comes to diseases, how they show up in other people that, just isn't your typical, Irish person.
Hi everyone, my name is Amira Tayinde and I'm a third year general nursing student. So I'm going to be discussing my experience of learning in Trinity from the perspective of a Black person. A lot of us Black people kind of felt almost ostracized in the classroom because, for example, if everyone in the whole lecture hall was talking, the Black people would be given out for talking rather than everyone just being given out for talking. And it kind of made it feel like, we just felt left out sometimes, and we felt like it kind of made us feel as if we didn't deserve to be there sometimes. But and from my own personal experience, like, I don't like being the type of person who is causing trouble or causing disruption. So I found myself having to even sometimes separate myself from my friends who are Black. And I think making such assumptions about people of colour or Black students is detrimental to their learning and is unfair because no one should have preconceived ideas placed on them. And I think this needs to be taken into consideration by lecturers and other students.
My name is Louis Lyons. I'm 19 and I'm a first year student studying Latin and Middle Eastern, Jewish and Islamic civilizations. So as a first year student in Trinity, my learning experience has been slightly limited, but so far it's been positive. The students in my course are quite diverse. Like, there are many non-Irish people, some of whom are from non-Western countries, which makes discussions in class interesting, as you get a wide range of opinions, and I think this adds to the learning experience. The issue of race has come up in the course a number of times, and I think it's well handled by the lecturers. I think they're sensitive to race as a topic, but also as an ongoing kind of lived experience for many students in the class. I haven't needed much support so far, but I do feel like if I did, it would be there. I've gotten a number of emails telling me about the colleges, writing supports, mental health supports, etc. One thing I think, however, is that no one's indicated any sort of designated specialist who can deal with racism in college, whether it be from staff or students. I think if someone were to experience, let's say, verbal racist abuse, as opposed to going to your tutor who may or may not be qualified or equipped or know how to deal with it, it might be worth looking into creating a contact for students and staff. Someone who you could go to for abuse, discrimination, harassment that may or may not constitute a hate crime, but undoubtedly warrants disciplinary action by the university, that kind of thing.
My learning experience at Trinity College Dublin from 2016 to 2020 was a very good one. Yes, there were various supports available in college that aided the learning experience. Curriculum at TCD was comprehensively inclusive with inculcation of cultural diversity, social background, race inclusiveness, and most especially guest speakers were invited to the classroom so that students can learn directly from source. TCD is a very inclusive center, but I would suggest that the staff members in the school community should recognize diversity, not just with mere words, and provide opportunities for Black students to be heard and listened to, whether in group activities or lecture rooms and academia society at large. Finally, staff should put all the provisions and knowledge gained in college to practice and support one another, most especially the Black students. Thank you.
The aim of this video was to identify how the students and staff of Trinity College can make the curriculum more inclusive to the Black students attending the university. With the help of Leslie, Kiki, Amirat, Louis and Temi, we are able to identify a few ways on how staff and students can help to make the curriculum more inclusive for Black students attending Trinity College.
Thank you very much. So it's pretty important what the video did to ask students directly what can be concretely improved in terms of a more diverse and inclusive curriculum. We had a few ideas here, such as like reading lists or activities to better reflect the fact that student population is increasingly diverse, etc. Or just communicate more on helplines and supports available in college for students undergoing discrimination. And I also very like the last argument, one of the last arguments, where it's suggested to actually create a contact for students and staff, a qualified specialist able to respond adequately to experiences of racism or discrimination. So again, it's very useful and important to have this type of feedback here. Do we have any questions so far from people in the room? Yeah.
I have one. I noticed in the options that went along with the idiom of the word black. What wasn't capitalized? Is there a certain distinction as to when the word black is capitalized and when it isn't?
So I would say, from my perspective anyway, you capitalize the word black or mixed race whenever you're referring to a community. That's what I would say.
Okay.
But I don't find anything, I don't find it particularly offensive if not. So.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to our second video then. So just a bit of context there. According to the latest Higher Education Authority National Access Plan, there have been marginal improvements in the number of students from the traveler community attending tier-level education, but they continue to remain low. So this video, created by Trinity Access Programs, aims to raise awareness about routes to higher education from members of the traveler community. In the video, members from this community, including social work graduate Kathleen, Trinity Access Foundation course student Michael, and TU Dublin student Anne-Marie, speak about barriers to third-level education they have faced and supports and resources they received from their colleges, which help them overcome them. And after that, I will be very happy to welcome Marlene O'Brien's here to see how this reflects or contrasts on their own experience. Now, open to the video.
Welcome to Excel Campus.
Hi, I'm Kathleen. I'm a member of the travel community. I did the Trinity Access Programme and I would have done the social stream, and I went on to do a degree in social work and I graduated this year.
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie McDonough. I'm a member of the travelling community. I'm currently in Technological University Dublin studying community and youth development, and I'm in third year.
Hi, my name is Michael Tennant. I'm a member from the travelling community. I'm currently studying the science route in the Trinity Access Programme.
I've made numerous friends, people I never probably would have met. Like, some of the people are so kind and generous, and we all come from different backgrounds, and so meeting people from other backgrounds as too, just some connections that I'll probably remember for the rest of my life. And just being able to be part of this college and the community around it, it's just been so great.
I would have left school when I was 12 and come back, I suppose, during that time. Education wasn't seen as, I suppose, as an importance in my family. I suppose my mom and dad would have left school early because of their negative experience they had in school, and I suppose it wasn't encouraged for me to stay on. I suppose years later I would have done some courses and I would have done some CE schemes, joint outreaches. The CE scheme I was on, I would have got an introduction into the Trinity Access Programme. I didn't think I would have a chance, but I suppose there are reserved places for members of the travelling community, so I knew I had a little bit of a chance of getting in.
So my background has been very different, like to the traditional route. I didn't stay in school. I left school at 14, and I didn't really think that education was important. But as I got a little bit older, I decided to go through like FOSS schemes and UREACH and early school leavers programs.
So for me, academically, I wanted to finish like secondary school and go to third level, because my dad would tell me stories just about how when he was a traveller trying to go into secondary school, he had to leave during second year because it was constant bullying. So him supporting me to make me go into third level, it really inspired me to go and try my best. And I was then told by my guidance counsellor that Trinity is linked to the school and they have the Trinity Access Programmes. And from there she was telling me about the application, the personal essay, and I filled them out, and then I had an interview. An interview I think I did quite well because I then got an email saying I was accepted, and I remember as soon as I got the email, I told my guidance counselor, like the first person, she was like very happy for me.
My experience going through the Access Programme, I would have got the Susie grant. I got this other grants you can actually apply for as well. During the time I was in college, it was the 1960 bursary.
The financial support as well. It's great for members who come from low-income families, because we're able to be on an equal playing field than people who have the money and who are able to go.
Like if you need help with your essays, there's supports there. If you need help with your mental health or your well-being, there's supports there. There's also like nurses on campus, there's doctors on campus, and there's so many supports available within college. So I would say like if people don't have the confidence to go to third level, like just apply for it and just go there. There's so many people that will help you.
I would have found out earlier on when I was in college that I had borderline dyslexia. I got a lot of support around that. The guidance counsellors linked me in with crimes. I suppose there was a girl that used to come in once a week and she'd meet me in the library and we'd go through the essays and go through the readings, and she offered me like so much support and it was really helpful. We need to see ourselves represented within the wider community. I would like to see a day that I'd go into a job and there's 2 other members of the travelling community there that's working there. We're not represented enough within the wider community. My experience, I always kept my identity throughout college. It didn't change. I know who I am. I kept my background. I'm well aware that I'm a member of the travel community. Everybody else is. You don't lose your identity just because you go to third level.
Like after college, there's so many benefits of doing a degree. Like there's so many options available to people so they can get a job, and it just creates so many contacts and connections. Like it also gives you like financial help as well. People won't have to worry like about finances as well. They can go on then and get a mortgage. They can buy the car that they want to buy. So balancing life and college can be a struggle sometimes, but I still have time to do everything that I want to do. I still have time to spend with friends and family and to go out like on the weekend or to go out and do stuff in the evenings. Sometimes assignments can be like take up a lot of time, but they're well worth it in the end. Some assignments are really short and can be done really quickly, so that's good. But if people are struggling like with balancing their life, there's so many supports like available for like mental health and for their well-being.
In TAP, it's all an equal playing field and everyone gets the same opportunities. Everyone's able to have the same chances, and the support is amazing. Like if you're struggling with anything, there's many resources for you. They want you to succeed. That's the whole plan. It's the TAP course is for you to succeed and you to do well.
So if I can do it, you can do it, and it opens so many doors for you, and the possibilities are never ending.
All right, Randy, would you like to join me on this one? Thank you very much. No problem. So it's very encouraging to have also positive feedback from students on this, on all the supports that they managed to get. How do you relate to that?
Well, I came from TAP last year, and I found it very frightening, to be honest. Like having completed secondary school and I finished my leaving cert at a young age, I was just kind of been thrown in the deep end and didn't know really what to do with myself. Went on and done a couple of courses just to see if it was for me. And then I fell into a job that I did love, and soon after, a couple of years after, I ended up having a baby. So the job kind of got put on hold or whatever, and then I just thought the best thing to do is to go back to education. I was always doing something, whether it be like a little course or like the previous students had explained, they went on to do like CE schemes and things like that. That was kind of what I started doing until I found something that I really enjoyed doing. And then when I had my daughter, she was probably not even a year, and I just knew either I'm going to be a stay-at-home mother, or I can go out and get something done about it. So that's what I intended to do. I first put my name down for TAP, and like the other students, there was that process of getting it onto the course, which happened. And I was very surprised by all the support that I did receive. And it's been amazing since day one. And like the other students said as well, that they always kept their identity. Same with me, like going back on from primary school experience, I was always that bit more embarrassed and didn't speak up about my background. I'd always kind of shy away from it. And no one kind of knew, because everyone had that kind of, not everyone, but a lot of people would be very judgmental, and I didn't feel confident and comfortable explaining about my background. And it might be a little bit different as to the way they were brought up, and education was never like on our list or our radar. And then like looking back now with like all my other cousins and things like that, like a lot of them have gone back into third level education, which has never happened before. All our parents kind of grew up and left work at young ages. They kind of went out and got jobs, or they were stay-at-home mothers. And so it's a great experience to be able to give people the opportunity to have a voice as well, I think, and to be able to lead them down a road that they know they want to go, and just let them be themselves. So I feel like that it's a great opportunity for anyone that wants to even express themselves too, as well as find out what they want to do.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would just like to add that it's also good to know that there are targeted places for members of the traveling community on the Trinity Access Foundation course, and that the initiative has proven actually successful in encouraging those from underrepresented backgrounds to continue their education. For example, in the case of Anne-Marie Collins, that is signed in Rio, she is now a primary school teacher and activist, and she has developed a resource for teachers to engage members of the traveling community from an early age. So yeah, that's great to know that some things are actually working. Do we have any questions on this for Marlene or on the travel community? Online, maybe? No? Yeah.
Thanks a million, Molly. I'm just wondering, did you always have that desire that you would sometimes go back, or was there a person, a teacher, somebody who encouraged you along the way, or was it really in you that you knew that you wanted to do that eventually?
I've never really had someone that had went on and progressed and had a, how do I put it? Everyone always had, like, you know, average jobs. There was not that much importance around work and education. So I think deep down, I kind of followed what I wanted to do more so than anything. I never really got a lot of support from family, but now I can say that my father, for instance, we'd be very close, and he'd be, you know, out making money. My mother would stay at home with the kids, and he's even adapted to encourage my other siblings to go out and, you know, go to education, you know, do the courses you want to do. And you don't have to just stick at these dead end jobs forever. There's an awful lot of experience out there. So I think deep down, I just wanted to do that for my daughter as well, because I know anything that I put my mind to it, whether it be like just being able to pass something or get over the line with something, I've always done it. I've never kind of backed out. So yeah, I think it's just been like pushing myself, really, to be honest. And then everyone else getting to see the results is good as well.
You're now trying to that path for everybody else.
Yeah,
your family.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, now I would like our Trinity-INC Student Parallel Liaison Officer to talk to us about the Let's Talk About Race training, the online module, and give an overview of the structure of it, how students and staff can access it, how it's led on the website, all those stuff.
Thank you, Aliyah. So I'm just briefly going to share some slides to give you an insight into the workshop that we did around the training during the summertime. Just bear with me for a second. Find them. There they are, sorry. So these are some questions we asked the students during the workshop. So just about like the strengths of the training, any key learning takeaways. Yeah, presenter view, is it? Oh yeah. There we go. So can you see me now?
Oh yeah.
Right. So we asked the students kind of to do the training and come back and answer these questions about like, so what they thought the strengths of the training were, any key learning takeaways. So you just see some of the responses here. So concrete examples of some strengths or the concrete examples of microaggressions involved in the training, unconscious bias, structural racism, and how they can play out in different scenarios. Another one here was how the clarity concerning racial literacy, for example, my knowledge regarding microaggression and how I have heard comments and ignored them rather than call out racial biases. So this was the space to acknowledge how much I need to learn about racism. Hearing directly from people who have experienced racism was key. The language was good and didn't feel too corporate or impersonal. Another good one was, I think, is comprehensive and it uses simple language, which I think is important to explain a very complex issue. So it touches on various aspects of racism as well as intersectionality and privilege. So overall, it provided a good introduction. So then any sticking points of the training, and is there anything that isn't clear? If someone said no, I don't know whether you're saying no to the sticking points or if anything wasn't clear. But then there was other suggestions, such as I would like a glossary or some definitions to help you clarify differences between ethnicity, discrimination, and racial discrimination. The experience of internalized racism by people who experience racism was mentioned. What a separate section could be made for that. The point about intersectionality could be elaborated further with examples too. And then there's evidence showing that unconscious bias training can be helpful and increase racial bias, as it doesn't address how to tackle these biases, but only bring these biases to a conscious level. That must be considered, as there is a section on unconscious bias in the training. Let's try this. So what we asked as well the students to kind of give us insights into what additional information should or could be housed with the training on the website. So we can see their recommended reading list, information about laws, acts that underpin the rights of those experiencing racism. So racial discrimination by employers, that's illegal, how to report racism, etc. How to support people experience racism. So like links to the stuff like INR and Free Legal Advice Centre, which is known as FLAC. Some more links to studies where appropriate would be nice. So, you know, linked up to other things. So you'll see in a moment that I also have the training is linked up to the Trinity Colonial Legacies Project. I'll just skip that one. So then these are some of the this is kind of just a little summary of the workshop. So what about what additional information should and could be included. So a glossary, a recommended reading list, some student testimonials, as in some student quotes about how they found the training and what was helpful for them. And then internal and external links such as INR, so the Irish Network Against Racism. There's a links to as I mentioned, the Colonial Legacies Project and Trinity, and then just policy in Ireland in general around discrimination. So just this is where at the moment where the training is housed. So if you go onto the EDI page and go and click into student training, and then you click on the Let's Talk About Race in Higher Education sector, and you get the drop down then, and it kind of gives you a little bit of context to why the training is important. So it's important because, you know, Ireland could becoming increasingly diverse, but that also because Trinity has a huge international, good international reputation. So, you know, by 2025, our international cohort will be a third of the student population. And then, as you see here, there's a couple of quotes from Trinity students that done the workshop. So acceptance of being uncomfortable while dealing with race issues made me feel better and safe. There's a lot of complexities around racism, and the module highlights these as well. And then it's empowering for students who may feel uncomfortable talking about race. So the module takes about 45 minutes to complete. And you do need your TCD signing credentials to access the training. So when you click into the training, it brings you into another platform, and then you have to click on a little tab in the corner called Catalog, and you access the training through there. So there's just other resources down at the bottom, as you can see, that I added. So there's links to the Trinity Colonial Legacies Project. There's a link to a glossary from Goldsmiths University of London around racial terminology. And then there's also links to Irish legislation and policy around discrimination in the workplace and in public spaces and stuff like that. And then also a link to the Irish Network Against Racism. So at the moment, it's more of a functional page. We are migrating to a new platform soon, so it may alter in the way it's laid out. But these are just the insights and into why the students wanted to give us this feedback and like the kind of things that we wanted to include with the training. I'd encourage everybody, staff and students, to access the training and to take it. It's as I mentioned, it is a very, very good way of kind of introducing yourself to these issues if you're not familiar with them. So thanks over to Aliyah again. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to talk about, oh, sorry, yeah.
And then just a direct question to that, like, I went through the training beforehand because I read about it, and I was fascinated, and I was wondering if there's a possibility to make this like mandatory for instance to staff. I know for students it would be surely voluntary, or what's the stage there, because I have mandatory health and safety training and other training as well that might find it really important.
Yes, I agree. It should be mandatory training. Rachel or Dorina, would one of you like to address staff from a staff perspective?
Yeah, we've looked into this on a number of occasions, but like you say, there's so many different trainings that staff can do, and it's very hard to actually mandate it. What we have looked at is, making sure that new tutors and new members of staff do it, but to mandate it to the whole population is very difficult. I don't know, Dorina, if there's any further developments on that.
No, that's it. I think there are, there are movements towards trying to make these core EDI modules compulsory, especially for new staff. I think that would be it, because there's another training also on the EDI website, which is even more central. It's kind of, or more basic. It's about kind of the EDI in the higher education space. And I think that they're trying to make that, trying to push that first. And then this is the extra layer, and making sure that we can build up the knowledge of our staff members as well as students, of course,
And there is a move, I think, the tutorial services that making sure that tutors kind of have a portfolio of these courses that they do and rewarding them in some way for that. I probably shouldn't be saying that. Because it's very early stages. So there are discussions around this, and it is something that, we're very aware of. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Just going back to the training, I just would like to add a few more points about why I found it useful from my own perspective. I did it during the summer. So first of all, I think it clearly identifies challenges and racial biases. So because of course, racism isn't just about explicitly racist language, abuse, or discrimination. It also takes the form of systemic inequalities and unconscious biases embedded in higher education. So I think the training is very useful for racialized people actually to identify those biases and recognize their own racist experiences and microaggressions. So because at least for me, microaggressions often go unnoticed, such as, for instance, I don't know, being mistaken for the cleaner when working late, or regularly asked to show your pass or your ID, being asked where you are really from, or told your name is too hard to pronounce sometimes as well. So those are examples, and I think it's important to be able to identify and potentially in order to manage them better in the future, and taking the cover off racism, if you will. So for the general Trinity community, I think the training also opens the discussion and provides answers to common questions people ask themselves, clarifying the use of certain concepts like that of white privilege, which is basically the fact that you can be white and suffering, but your suffering isn't based on your ethnicity or the color of your skin. Very quickly said. And also the concept of tokenism is a very interesting one, which stands for a symbolic and performative effort, which is often superficial from organizations to appear as an example of fairness and diversity. So we see that a lot in advertising, for instance. Also, like very, very cool concepts like intersectionality when thinking about identity and its relationship to power. So for instance, how aspects of a person's social and political identities combine together to create different forms of disadvantages and privilege. So for instance, a Black woman, you have those two aspects, being Black and being a woman, that intersect. And so of course, this experience is different from being a Black man and different from being a white woman. So that's what I meant here. So of course, we have to acknowledge the difficulty of appropriately defining everything in the correct way without using umbrella terms. So yeah, I think in that way, the training refreshes our knowledge in this area, whether you're racialized or not. So yeah, and also during my session over the summer, the participants I was with dared to ask questions that they were uncomfortable or afraid to ask in an everyday life context. So for instance, there was a question from a young lady asking if it's okay or not to comment on or ask permission to touch Afro hair, for instance. Women's hair and Afro hair in general always are like very central to this idea. And I believe my answer about this was rather to put the ball in their court, to not take away the personal space, their right to personal space and their right to agency. People are not objects, obviously, they have human dignity. And also to ask yourself whether you would have asked this question to another person with different traits and different hair types, like straight hair, for instance. Or would you have asked an older person whether you could touch their hair, something like that. So because the intersection of being young as well plays into it, to my opinion anyway. So if you do ask the question in the end, be prepared also to be told no, simply, and accept people's boundaries, basically. So that's what I would say there. But what I think is even more significant about the training is that most of the voices that we hear in the training, like snippets of videos, are from racialized people or people from ethnic minorities speaking from a very personal perspective rather than an academic one, and offering powerful testimonials. So this raises our awareness with concrete example of systemic structural racism, although it is from the perspective of the workplace, which is a slight criticism. Those examples can also apply in higher education. For instance, when an institution's policies or website does not reflect the ethnic diversity of its workforce, or when racially offensive language or disrespectful language is not challenged immediately and called out as unacceptable in some team environments. Yeah, so of course, in the end of the training, you are provided with advice, pieces of advice and resources as to where to start in order to tackle all of these issues, both individually and at the level of organizations, which I found very interesting as well, because it's also a top to bottom thing, I would say. So yeah, it definitely is an important step towards a more inclusive community. However, it's clear that just one training alone cannot do everything, even though it's great to have it. So we need to find more ways to talk about those issues. So with that in mind, I would like to invite today's wonderful panel to join me for a discussion and Q&A regarding how we can and should talk about race and ethnicity in Trinity. All right. We have Ryan here, Louis Lyons, and Samuel Adebayo. So we're delighted to have such great speakers today. And since part of this event is also and also part of the Trinity-INC works, is to be able to own one's identity and speak for oneself. I'm not going to introduce everybody, but I will let our speakers introduce themselves first and give a few words about who they are. And yeah, would you want to say?
Yes, so my name is Louis Lyons. I'm mixed race, Irish, Nigerian, and I've lived in Ireland my whole life, but I've lived as very aware that I'm slightly different from everyone around me. I very much live in the world of race. As my mum is an academic in this field, so I've always been kind of enveloped in having race around me as long as I've lived. Yeah.
As you all are aware, I'm Marlene. I'm currently in first year BES, having completed TAP last year, and a member of the traveling community also.
I'm Samuel Isijola. I'm in second year biological and biomedical sciences. I am Nigerian Irish, so I'm first generational Irish, but both my parents are Nigerian. And I've lived in Ireland. I was born in Ireland and I've lived there for a majority of my life. I went to I only moved back to Dublin for college last year when I was in first year, but I did go to secondary school in West Meath. So that's kind of confirm my identity, I would say. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to you three to be here present with us today. We have a few very interesting questions. So the first one is, what are we talking about when it comes to race and ethnicity? What do they relate to, according to you? So how does it manifest itself to you, or what are your understandings of these terms of race and ethnicity?
I would say race is really phenotypical in the sense that it's a social construct. Like, it was made obviously years and years ago just to put people into specific categories, and because divide and conquer, obviously, when you get down to just some of it, if you were to actually open all over, so you'd all be red and skeletons and muscles and everything. But race is a social construct really just based off of phenotype and the color that you are, and it doesn't really based off of the construct that it was made off of, it doesn't really go into the depth of your actual ethnicity. I'd say ethnicity is a good one to talk about because ethnicity is more based off of your cultural, like where you are culturally and everything. For example, your language, your upbringing and everything, because obviously racially speaking, I'm a Black man, but when it comes to my ethnicity, I'm Yoruba and Nigerian. So a lot of my practices and everything would be like based off of my Yoruba culture and everything, like the Yoruba language, Yoruba traditions and so on and everything. So that'd be probably the main difference between the two of them. Race is a social construct based off of your phenotype and how you look, but your ethnicity is actually who you are, like your traditions and everything back and forth.
Yeah, wouldn't you say though that ethnicity is also somewhere historically and socially constructed as well?
I'd say ethnicity could be historically and socially constructed, but the thing that differentiates the two of them is that ethnicity has a lot more intersectionality in the sense that you could be from a particular ethnic group without having to share a phenotype with other people. For example, there's many Arabic people who are from who have a plethora of different races. There's white Arabic people, there's Black Arabic people, there's Arabic people from Asia as well and everything. So they all share different phenotypes, so they do look different, but they all share Arabic culture, Arabic ethnicities. It's the exact same with Latino people from Latin America. There's Afro Latinos, there's white Latinos from countries like Argentina and everything. Like, they would share the same culture. They all speak Spanish and everything, except for Brazilians and Portugal and everything. But like, ethnically speaking, they're all connected in the sense that they share the ethnicity of being Latino, regardless of their skin tone and their phenotype.
Yeah, very good point here. Marlene, what do you think? How do you relate to ethnicity? How does it present itself to you?
It's different. Like, my father would be a traveler, my mother wouldn't be. So being able to compare the two groups, it's very similar. My dad would have his own language, if you want to call it that. It'd be like different slang words for different things. There'd be different beliefs around certain ways people act or behave. But judging off, say, different kind of cultures, that's when I don't know how to approach certain things. You know, I remember the question from earlier that was said to yourself about you know, like how, I'm not sure if I have the right word for it, but how would you define a person like that? I personally wouldn't know the correct way to approach that, to be fair. because I know that people would approach me in certain ways that I would find a little bit harsher than, you know, not knowing if you mean it as an insult or knowing if they say it as confusion. So for me, it is a bit difficult to understand, to be honest.
They are obviously very difficult to define and to like create clear boundaries to.
That's it.
To define
I already know like knowledge of this, whereas I don't know a whole lot of knowledge about all your different types of groups, if that makes sense. But it's saying anything bad.
Thank you.
No problem.
What's your perspective on race?
I think Simon hit the nail on the head when he said that race is very phenotype heavy. It's a visible, it is visible, whereas ethnicity is not always as visible. I think it's it's made evident in kind of the question, where are you from versus where are you really from. I think the question, where are you from, is trying to genuinely understand someone's ethnicity and get to know them, whereas where are you really from is an assumption they've made based on your race. And so that kind of creates the distinction between the two.
Yeah, and obviously it's not pleasant to be reduced to one and only aspect of your identity, which can also be wrong, actually, because we have like the spectrum of ethnicity, and the spectrum of the skin color is super broad, super large, from light to super dark. So obviously you can never know when you see someone where they are from, and it's okay for them also not to tell you if they don't want to. Or to stick to a very vague answer. So yeah, I think this question of where you come from is extremely interesting. Actually, when you do get those questions, where you come from, what do you usually answer?
I would just say like as it is really. Like I came into TAP last year and just being able to express myself that little bit. I met like different travelers in the group, like to be able to compare like my family as opposed to their family. We had so many different similarities, but then again it was very different. But like any other person say that had approached us or whatever, I just kind of say it as it is. Like I come from a traveling background, and I'd never really get a bad answer back to that, in fairness, and I'd be open and honest about it. I'm always quite open. Yeah, like that's what I was saying earlier. Like years ago, I'd be more like embarrassed or I wouldn't speak up, and now I'm just like, it's what it is, and I'm happy with that.
Oh, that actually works sometimes. Samuel and Louis, do you also get this insistence of like, no, really, but originally? Do you get out?
Yeah, and I think sometimes like depending on how I think they've asked me, I'll have a shorter fuse than other times.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes someone asks where I'm from, I'll say Ireland. They'll say where you're really from, and I know what they're looking for, and I refuse to give it to them. So I'll say Dublin, and then they'll say where are you from, and I'll say North Dublin. They'll say where are you from, and I'll say Tosin, and they say where are you from. like number 12, like what are you looking for? And like I'd say Europe, and I'd say the world before I gave them what they're from. And sometimes that's just kind of how I'm feeling that day. Like sometimes they might just get lucky, and sometimes I might say it straight away. It depends on how I feel like they said and why I think they're asking me the question, and whether or not I think they're going to accept the question or accept my answer.
It's like a sort of game of guessing which stars right over, because I already have this image of you. I kind of think I know where you come from. I want to project it upon you, and until you actually say what I want to hear, I'm gonna ask and ask and ask.
That's why I find it a bit more difficult, because I'm like, everyone has boundaries, and it's like you don't want to kind of say something to someone and it affects them in a negative way when you're probably just trying to say it as a general question, if that makes sense. That's why I find it a bit more difficult to approach, certain different people's races and things like that. So I always kind of just listen, just how they feel about it or what they're comfortable talking about.
What I think is also important to say here, I don't know about you, Samuel, but the question itself is actually absolutely decent, really normal. I ask it as well. It's just like the really, that's where it starts to like go over.
It implies you're lying.
It implies that what you're saying is not valid. Yeah.
like you're wrong. You almost didn't know.
No, you're not, like, you don't
They
know where you're
they
coming
know,
from.
and
I
I just really don't get the same.
I just want a specific answer.
Yeah.
Terminology is really important and intention as well, because a lot of times if like a person asks me where you're from and then I'm like, oh yeah, lunch. And then they're like, okay, cool, what's your ethnicity? Then if we're going into specifics, and then I'm like, oh, I'm Nigerian. And then the next thing that comes is they're like, oh really, you're really well spoken. What do you
Oh my God.
like, what do you mean by that? Because like in Nigeria, our primary language obviously is the language for your ethnic group, but the national language of Nigeria is English. So it's like,
Yeah.
when they're like, your English is so good, I'm like, I kind of hope so.
Yeah, very similarly. As a French person, I'll sometimes get, how come you speak French so well? Okay, that's my mother program. Yeah, so, yeah, I see no wonder. Do you have any other contributions on race and ethnicity as concepts per se?
Not yet. I'm really stressed, but it's very interesting.
If if one is out and about and one overhears someone and one overhears a person being harassed like that, asked where they're really from, how or should one
Interesting question. Should one intervene?
I think it's really up to the individual. Like if they choose to intervene, like that's very good of them. Like it shows that they're actively like they're putting their money where their mouth is. It's not that they're just trying to be performative. It's like, oh, they actually do care about other people's feelings. But if they intervene, I'd say it's just a matter of like that's just not the correct terminology to use. I think.
Yeah.
I'd say something like that. Something simple like, oh, some might find the phrasing of that question quite offensive, because just straight to the point. Because if the other person takes offense of you saying, oh yeah, someone might find this offensive, they don't really care about the message you're trying to pass on. They care more about their own comfort rather than the comfort of the other person, if that makes sense. You know?
Yeah, so basically you can always say that this terminology is not really appropriate there, but also I don't think it's your you don't have to intervene, you're not obliged to. So it's really something about the person being asked and the person asking.
It's just I remember I was out on school, and I remember what all of the security guards asked is over the Asian ethnicity where she was from, and she said Canada, and kept going. Well, where are you really from?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh yeah, those situations happen quite a lot, unfortunately. But yeah, that's why we also having these conversations to like raise awareness around those issues and like, yeah, just take the answer, guys. Take the first step. All right, moving on to the second question then. What does justice and non-discrimination look like when it comes to race and ethnicity? For instance, in higher education, what is your vision of an ideal university?
To be fair, my experience with Trinity is it's very diverse. We had like students from different countries, like I said, being a traveler in a traveling background, and people with, you know, just coming in with different cultures and things like that. But everyone was very, how do I put it? They were very easy to get along with. Whoever like wanted to speak up about their kind of lifestyle and that had the will to do so, and everyone seemed to be very comfortable and open about being able to speak up too. So I think in fairness, like maybe it's just like my opinion on it, but last year has been a very good experience to make me even feel comfortable coming in and being able to speak up about my background but I'm not sure how you feel about it either.
No, but that's great that you can feel comfortable as well in campus for people.
Like for jobs, for instance, I'd never step into a job. Now I have done, but like maybe about a couple of years back, I wouldn't be able to step into a job and say, oh, I'm like from traveling background. I feel like I'd be quite judged by that. And then like a lot of my family, I'm not sure if these are all familiar, passed away in the Carrick Mines fire, which the anniversary is actually today, 7 years now. And that kind of highlighted a lot of, you know, the culture of travelers and things like that. But yeah, it was, I just found it like it was a great kind of course to step into, that you'd be able to feel comfortable with talking to different people and have that experience and getting to share similarities and stuff.
And you need to feel comfortable and having this justice and non-discrimination. Do you think that goes through opening discussion, conversing,
Yeah, and like even class lecturers would, you know, ask student questions or some topic come up, and everyone, like not everyone, but people would have different opinions on certain things, or people would kind of talk about like their life experiences and what they, you know, maybe had to do before, or what way they felt about a certain topic and things. So it's good because it's not something I'd be very familiar with, but I'd be interested to kind of get to know different groups and, you know, how people feel and what, you know, yeah, it's just all new for me.
Yeah, it's also
But it's
good to
very
know
good.
about other intersections, other experiences of discrimination that we're not like.
Definitely. Like even comparing, like say when I was first in primary school, I remember like there was like a lot of Irish and probably like a few of different backgrounds. Stepping into TAP, there was like so many different nationalities and different cultures. It was very good experience.
Yeah. So what do you think about that?
I think regarding like seeing racial equity and justice in Trinity, I'd say it's like it'd be achieved when like you're able to, like as a student from a different background or anything, or a student with different ethnicity that isn't like, or marginalized ethnicity, just to say it in easier terms, like you're able to go through your day to day without feeling different at all regarding your ethnicity, regarding your race, like not even having to taught it all that it's there, because a lot of us, like we all share the experience, which is growing up, like our ethnicity and our backgrounds, like it was constantly at the back of our mind, not at a thing of like choice or like pity, but it was constantly at the back of our mind as a reminder, and it almost is like not really a safety net, but in the sense it's like, oh, if I constantly remember this, I won't feel one type of way when someone acts like discriminatory towards me because I'm Black, because it's like I'm already expecting this. I'm constantly expecting this. It's always at the back of my mind.
It's kind of like me as well. Just waiting to hear that, you know, that certain word.
Exactly.
Like,
so it's like,
now it's
expected. So I'd say justice and racial justice and racial equality and everything can be achieved when like that constant thing looming over our head and at the back of our heads isn't there anymore, because we can't, because it's like it doesn't matter anymore. Like even though it is really taboo to say and everything, when people a lot of people do say when they refuse to actually acknowledge racism that they don't see color. But once we actually come to a stage where we're able to we ourselves not acknowledge like our backgrounds and everything because we feel like we have to, I feel like that's when we properly like got into racial justice and everything. Like if you don't have it constantly looming over your head, oh yeah, just a reminder, I'm from the traveling background, so and so, some people are discriminatory. We don't have the notion that, oh yeah, we're Nigerians, we're from different ethnicities, we're Black, so and so. Like the day that it's not constantly doing over our head, and we don't have to have that kind of shield and jacket just as a constant reminder that we could just be like going across day to day like our non-marginalized counterparts. I feel like that's when it's actually been achieved. If that makes sense. Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, for instance, from my own perspective, whenever I enter my classroom, I just can't help but noticing I'm the only one looking like me.
Yeah.
And that's not something bad. Like I don't have anything against whiteness or anything. But yeah, you just notice that in the entire theater, you're the only person that's brown or Black. So yeah, I think that the day that we forget about oppression in the mirror, then that's the day where okay, we have long ones there.
I think for me, the idea of racial justice, like Samuel said, people who say they're colorblind and don't acknowledge race, I think that's it's quite limiting. I think this talk is a great example of how Trinity does quite well to acknowledge race and ethnicity, because in a way we've all been, like us up here, we've been segregated, like we've been chosen to come up here because of our race or ethnicity, but in a positive way, because Trinity have decided to use that to hear our voices and to change things. So I think racial justice kind of, and I think it mimics the real world, not to get too political for a second, but a phrase like Black Lives Matter it's kind of segregating, because obviously it's not saying everyone matters, but it's recognizing the racialization of certain kinds of people and acknowledging different needs for different people. And I think it's the whole equality versus equity thing. Like, okay, everybody deserves justice, but there need to be a talk for certain students so we can get their specific voices, so we can get a specific kind of justice for those students.
I think that nuance is very important during this talk.
But I think a talk like this is a really good example of Trinity putting that into practice. So, well done.
Do you guys have any more contributions in this question on racial justice? No? Okay, we can move on to the next question then. How does race and ethnicity intersect with the Trinity student experience? So we heard your voice earlier in the videos extra on Black students' experiences in college. Does your view on this question change?
Well, I still personally feel quite new to Trinity, but I think spending more time with the Trinity-INC student partnership, I'm like quite impressed with their ambition and their willingness to help. Like whether or not they know what the issue are, they're incredibly willing to hear what the issues are, and they're incredibly willing to act once they're told. I think what I said in the video was that I know that racial discrimination at the moment, I think, is kind of seen as bullying from the university, but that it's entirely different. It's just a whole different thing. And I think like Trinity, just having more racial or racially equipped and racially sensitive or racially literate and racially educated staff, like Sean's work with the Let's Talk About Race training module. I think that's great to see, because that's what we need to get to the racial justice that we're all talking about.
Having professionals actually to able to understand and act upon those issues with students directly, rather than going from like one helpline to another. And so how does this question intersect with your experience as a student in Trinity? Do you have any experience in classrooms that you noticed that those concepts of race and ethnicity were salient there?
I'd say obviously studying a science degree it is really objective in the sense where it's very factual and everything. But someone did point it out in the video that we watched regarding like, it'd be nice to see more diagrams of different ethnicities and everything, like when it comes to seeing for example, the development of an embryo into a fetus and everything, to see what that'd be like illustrated on Asian skin or illustrated on Black skin and so on. So just regarding representation is extremely important. And I think that luckily as a society, and obviously as Trinity is doing a good job with moving forward and more inclusivity and everything, like obviously the discussion we're having now. But as a society, we're only realizing now the importance of lack of representation and everything, because it's a new phenomenon and everything, like racial, like we do talk about race, like racial issues and racial history as if it was something of thousands of years ago, but this is really recent. Like a lot of this is only in the last 150 years and so on. So we're actually adapting quickly and everything. So obviously only now that they're ready to talk about and everything, they're also ready to see the downfall that representation hasn't had, if that makes sense. I remember for example, like regarding like seeing representation is important. So like I had a lecture for I think it was the second week of the semester for Maltese cells, and his name's Ken Mock. He's an Asian lecturer, and like just seeing a lecturer of a different background was so impactful and so motivational to me. Because like of course, it's nice seeing all my lectures and everything. Like, of course, it's nice to see like these are all established scientists working and teaching in the field. But seeing people of a different background, even though he wasn't Black, and even though I don't identify with any of the ethnicities that he is, it's just nice seeing the regardless of his background and everything, regardless of all the racial experiences he probably experienced as well as an Asian man and everything, he still overcame it and everything, and still rose to be who he is today. Yeah. And I just think that's really motivational to see as a Black man as well, because it shows that I myself can one day be in that position as well. Mm-hmm. So representation doesn't always have to be like me seeing someone who looks like me as well. Mm-hmm. Just seeing like minorities that haven't been portrayed before, like seeing that they can achieve, like seeing they can achieve what I hope to achieve one day is sometimes even enough, if that makes sense. Oh, okay. Yeah. So
yeah, this thing of representation is super important for you as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think I can compare a lot, judging by everyone speaking here, as well as the videos, and just getting to see like past students been able to go and, you know, graduate and do the degrees of the courses that they want to do, and then it opens the door up to what careers that they want to go down. And then like being able to see that just kind of gives me that bit of reassurance that can happen these days. And you know, like you don't have to not put all focus in because you don't feel like you're good enough or people might judge you or whichever, but to basically go off on what you want to do because you know that it's right for you.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and also even for me, like being able to exchange with someone from a different background on, for instance, my research on mixed heritage women with Dr. Philomena over there. Hello. I was just going to say that having a discussion with you on such issues and knowing that you would 100% understand where my issues were and what discussion had to be made was very helpful as well. So representation does matter actually for me. We can move on to sorry.
We have one question in the chat actually. It's from Aki, who's a STEM student.
Yeah.
And they say, does anyone else feel the pressure of representing their race in social settings? I am the only Black person in my class and constantly feel the need to know stuff and learn faster.
Yeah.
Definitely 100%. Yeah. Like for a lot of these experiences, like we would you like not even just being the token representative, like for a lot of the time we do keep at the back of our mind, like the same thing we were talking about before, that like we constantly feel and we constantly remember our heritage at the back of our mind, not as a matter of choice, but as a matter of necessity. But a lot of the times we do also remember that like this is like as sad as it could be, this might be the only experience said individual has with a Black person and everything. So I like, as sad as it sounds, yeah, I would subconsciously like put on my A game. I try to speak as eloquently as possible. I would try to like show that I actually know my stuff. Like it is sad that a lot of times as marginalized individuals, we do have to actually prove ourselves before we are considered the same level as our peers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah.
Very, very quick example, like of what person here was saying. In a classroom where I would be the only Black woman there, some questions would be directly addressed to me. Questions about Islam or Africa. You know what I mean? Like it's super broad concept. I don't even know half of what there is to know about my about Senegal, my own country. So what about Africa? What about Islam as a religion? So yeah, it's I think it's unnecessary pressure put onto the students, who is put out of their position as any student and being brought into the front as a spokesperson of an entire minority, an entire community. For instance, the question about Islam, I had no idea what the answer was. The big question was like, what's the color of Islam? Islam doesn't have a color. Spoiler alert. But I did remember that my mom had a green Quran in her stuff. So I said green, and the teacher like nodded and be like, yeah, that's the answer. And I was it's like, it's also like there's also this type of shame when you're not, when you don't know the answer, and you pressure yourself, and you're like, oh, I should have known the answer. I should have been able to answer. What do we do this?
It would just wasn't ourselves to start higher standard. Our parents wouldn't have to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we'd be teaching if you know all that.
Yeah, I remember being like 10 and then in primary school, and then we're learning about slavery, and then like, yeah, slavery, it's a very sad thing that happens to all African Americans, and then everyone just turns out to you. I'm from Blanche. Like, I know we're learning about this together. I'm 10. It's just like, we're literally children, like we're in the exact same playing field and everything. Like, of course, when growing up, you will obviously choose to learn more about the traveling community and everything that did then shoot. And same with the Black community and everything. It was like, I'm literally a child right now. Like, I don't really know. Yeah.
But I don't know about what you guys think, but for instance, I'm having like difficulties with the word community, like Black community, because to me it's way too broad in certain sense. For instance, I have a friend, she's from IT, but she is French and she was adopted. So how does she relate to this Black community? How does she relate to all that? She was telling me the other day that to her, like, if she was white, it would be the same thing. Definitely, she considered herself French. She doesn't have any like a link to this culture. So yeah, it's idea of a Black community.
That's what I was saying. The difference between ethnicity and race is so important. It's like it is unfortunate. It's just because of this shared inheritance. Like the only reason, in my opinion, this may be seen as controversial, but the only reason why the Black community is shelled upon together as the Black community is because the struggles that we do face as an inherent group. Like a lot of people will see Black people and then they give them the same amount of discrimination, regardless of if they're from the Dominican Republic or if they're from Senegal or Nigeria, if that makes sense. But like that's the only similarity that we have. So we can identify ourselves within those struggles that we do face together as said Black community. But aside from that, it's really ethnically speaking, because as a Yoruba Nigerian, like I don't really know if there's much I can identify, like similar wise with you being Senegalese, because like language wise we do speak completely different languages and everything, and then probably culturally wise and practice wise and everything. I'm sure that there are similarities, but it's just kind of like a lot of times they do, if you translate it into like Western standards and everything, it'd be trying to paint Irish people and people from Belarus under the same brush. It's kind of like they're really different. They're actually really, really different. So yeah.
Yeah, we should apply the way we perceive people and frontiers, like in Europe, the same way we see people and frontiers in Africa.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah, so we also have another very interesting question. I'm really looking forward to hear your responses to this one. So a lot of questions thread the line between positive curiosity and exoticism, or cultural celebration or appreciation and cultural appropriation. So how do you guys manage this? What approach would you consider appropriate, or if you have any advice on this?
Do you want to give your point of view?
Yeah, sure.
Just to understand it.
So sorry, it just makes me yeah, so positive curiosity and exoticism versus fetishism. We had this question actually from the Let's Talk About Race training during the summer, where this young girl was just asking me, okay, so I do not come from a background where there was a lot of diversity, where I grew up, and I'm really interested in knowing more about the culture of people of color, of how they do their hair, and just to know more about that authentically, like in a very positive approach. And she was saying, so where's the line between me doing this in order to learn more about the community and me being offensive or fetishizing them? Because she was also saying that she finds Afro hair beautiful and all that. So that's the kind of example I have in mind for this one.
I think that specific example, just asking the question, is there like one way to get away with the kind of like potential microaggressions that people have, is
denying the fact that each person is an individual. So it's like if someone was looking to touch a Black woman's hair and they said, what's the correct way to ask? Well, it assumes that each Black woman is going to respond to the question the same way. Like, there is no one, like, you could be asking it in an offensive way, but there could be someone who doesn't mind. Like, like you could ask it in a really, really nice way, but they could understand what you're trying to do and not dislike the intention and still be offended. So I think, like, just understanding who the person is and thinking of them as an individual person and like tailoring your actions to each individual instead of thinking, like, because this person is from a minority, I have to be sensitive, but be sensitive in the one way that I've been taught works with this kind of person, like as if everyone from that minority is going to have the same response. So I think just tailor your actions to the individual themselves.
Yeah, it's not as much about intentions as how they land
Yeah.
the person.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's always a good advice to give to people to communicate on all this, to explain that you're very interested in knowing more about this and that you don't mean to be offensive. And yeah, I would say so. And what about Sam? I know we had a meeting and we talked about a bit about cultural appreciation versus cultural appropriation. What's your take on this one?
I think cultural, the topic and everything, cultural appreciation versus appropriation is really important because like in some senses people won't understand it and the importance and the complexity of it, and I'll just see it as a like, right, if I'm not Nigerian, I shouldn't do this. If I'm not Irish, I shouldn't do this. It's a blank sheet of paper that completely like just avoids all the nuances and everything beside it. The importance of cultural appropriation is like, let's say for example, Kim Kardashian, there's a hairstyle that many women, African women, Black women, so like just Black women, a lot of Black women wear called box braids. And it's just having your hair in a specific hairstyle, so on and so on. So there's not really an issue with it over here. But in America per se, a lot of Black women have been castigated for wearing that protective style, and they're even in their workplaces and everything, they're actually discriminated for simply hair. It is something like locally enough. I can't speak for Black women in Ireland, of course, but from what I've heard and from people I've spoken to, it's not as crazy or to the extent that it is in America. But like Black women in America, regardless, are being castigated and everything for wearing this particular hairstyle. So for an influencer as big as Kim Kardashian to come and wear the hairstyle with no significance and everything is one thing. Like, that's fair enough. Like, if she just thought it was cute and everything and said, all right, cool, fair enough, that's fine. Well, it's a complete other thing for her to wear it and then say, guys, look at this hairstyle that I invented. That's where it lands into appropriation. Not only are you like taking something from a community, from an ethnic group and everything, from a culture, and taking it as your own, you're hence trying to profit off of it, which makes it a lot worse considering people are literally the same color or in the same country and being punished and ridiculed for wearing that exact hairstyle. The only difference is your skin tone. So I'd say that's the importance of it regarding appreciation versus appropriation. Like, you can appreciate something, you can like say like, I think this is cool and everything. You can celebrate it. Yeah, and you can celebrate and everything. But when you actually try to appropriate it and make it as your own, then profit off of it, especially when people are literally being punished for doing it and everything, it is a little bit
it's always very difficult to draw the line, a clear line between whatever it is. But what I would like to bring, like as a last nuance here, is that you can, I mean, according to me at least, you can never be sure 100% in most cases whether it is cultural appropriation or appreciation, especially when you see someone walking down the streets with like displaying very distinctive pictures from the culture. You cannot be sure 100%. So unless you actually sit with them and have a discussion. But so I just wanted to say that it's not a very good idea to assume someone's identity based on their looks, as we just said here. It can be very reductive. So thank you guys so much for this meaningful discussion, for speaking so openly and personally about your own experiences. And because we don't want all of these important questions to get lost in the blur and have this conversation in a vacuum, I would like to invite our project manager at Trinity-INC, Darina Johnson, to join me and tell us more about what allies can also take away from this conversation.
I actually don't want to say much because hearing your voices has been incredible and it's been so rich, and thank you so much. It's been an amazing session. And I think one of my main takeaways is voice, and how it's just your individual voice, which is really interesting. It's your own perspective. And I think that's what we need to stick with, that we're stronger together in our diversity. And I guess on that note, I'd like to actually hear one takeaway that you'd like us to take away. And this is not representing anything other than your minds. And, you know, after the last hour and a half of talking and all that kind of thing, what one takeaway do you want us all to take? You know, I know it's, you know, I'm not trying to be reductive either, but just one message or one idea or something that you're taking away, or anything at all that you think Trinity-INC and the Trinity community should take away.
To have more views.
Yeah, have the conversation.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to have these conversations because it's really important. And
I've learned so much just hearing everyone's different opinions. I've always been in like a group that never really associated much with different cultures, if that makes sense. I've always known about certain things, but I never known people's experiences, people's cultures, backgrounds, all that. So for me, it was very new and very interesting.
Thank you so much, Marlene.
And thank you everyone for attending our event today. We had great interventions and certainly a lot to think about. I would like to address a warm thanks to our wonderful panel here. Thank you very much. And Sean and Darina for the help for the logistics and for making this event even possible. Thank you very much. And yeah, guys, don't hesitate to look at all of our wonderful Trinity Inclusive Festival events for the next 10 days. It's going to be very interesting. Thank you so much.
Yeah,